Hello and welcome to lecture number 64. This is topic 4.11, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. There's only one learning objective, and it's to explain how the Black Panther Party pursued political, economic, and social reforms in the 20th century. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in 1966 in Oakland, California, while they were students at Merritt College. They broke away from some of the groups at the college, criticizing them as being overly intellectual or focused on reactionary nationalism. In the midst of the civil rights and Black Power movements, the Black Panther Party focused on addressing practical and structural problems in their communities. They began by patrolling neighborhoods, following police, and monitoring arrests to combat police brutality and the killing of black men by law enforcement. The patrols were heavily influenced by the 1963 death of Denzel Dowell, an unarmed black man shot by police in Richmond, California, which the Panthers investigated and deemed an act of brutality. This early focus on police oversight mirrored broader concerns across the nation, as the Watts riot in Los Angeles just a year earlier in 1965 had been sparked by police violence. Eventually, their activities expanded to include voter registration drives, and members such as Bobby Seale and Elaine Brown even ran for city offices in Oakland in 1973. They supported other black candidates such as Shirley Chisholm, who made history as the first black woman to run for a major party's nomination for president in 1972. Chisholm's campaign also garnered support from women's groups and anti-war activists, highlighting a coalition-building approach similar to that of the Panthers. Overall, the Black Panthers were viewed as revolutionary and radical. This perception stemmed from their ideology, heavily inspired by Malcolm X and the broader Black Power movement. Newton and Seale also drew from the teachings of revolutionary thinkers such as Frantz Fanon, whose book The Wretched of the Earth provided a framework for decolonization and armed resistance. Fanon's book was included as required curriculum for new Black Panther members and inspired some of their demands in their 10-point program. The Panthers deliberately promoted a strong militant image symbolized by their black leather jackets, berets, and open carrying of firearms. This stance often led to confrontations with law enforcement. For instance, Huey Newton was convicted of manslaughter in the death of an Oakland police officer in 1972, which further fueled their radical reputation. Even though he was shot in the abdomen in this encounter and his conviction was later reversed upon appeal, the Panthers retained a militant image. By 1968, the organization dropped self-defense from their name, becoming simply the Black Panther Party. This change reflected their broader ambitions as they began addressing issues like healthcare, education, and housing. The main tenets of the Black Panther Party were published in 1966 in the second issue of their newspaper, The Black Panther. This document, called the 10-point program, became the ideological foundation of the party. The program identified the structural inequalities faced by African Americans and proposed practical solutions, combining revolutionary ideals with immediate community needs. The points listed without explanation on the right side of the screen reflected the party's focus on targeting systemic injustices. For example, the program explicitly denounced capitalism in point 3, stating, "We want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our black community." This demand reflected their belief that economic exploitation was central to the oppression of black people. The Panthers also demanded freedom from oppression and imprisonment, calling for the release of all black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons. They justified this demand by asserting that black defendants were not given fair trials by juries composed of their peers, referencing point 9 of the program. This stance reflected broader concerns about the racial bias of the U.S. judicial system, which disproportionately targeted black communities, a fact highlighted by studies during the 1960s. The program also called for access to housing provided by the federal government as a form of reparations. Healthcare was another priority, along with access to education that not only addressed academic needs, but also taught black history and acknowledged the discrimination endured by African Americans throughout American history. This educational demand anticipated the push for ethnic studies programs that emerged on college campuses during the late 1960s. Additionally, the Panthers sought full employment for African Americans, emphasizing government's responsibility in addressing systemic economic inequality. The 10-point program ended with excerpts from the Declaration of Independence. This was not only to assert that all people are entitled to inalienable rights, but also to imply that a government failing to protect these rights could and should be abolished or replaced. This reference echoed the rhetoric of revolutionary movements worldwide, including the anti-colonial struggles in Africa and Asia, which the Panthers openly supported. By tying their demands to the founding principles of the United States, the Panthers sought to frame their movement as both a challenge to systemic injustice and the fulfillment of the country's original ideals. The Black Panther Party's platform strongly promoted and justified the right to bear arms for self-defense, emphasizing this point in point 7 of their 10-point program. They explicitly identified arming themselves as a solution to police brutality and the murder of black people, stating, "The Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives the right to bear arms, and we therefore believe that all black people should arm themselves for self-defense." This stance was influenced by historical black self-defense traditions such as those upheld by groups like the Deacons for Defense and Justice during the Civil Rights Movement. This commitment culminated dramatically in 1967 when Black Panthers entered the California state capitol, openly carrying weapons to protest the proposed Mulford Act. This law sought to ban open carry in California, which the Panthers saw as a direct attempt to disarm black communities. The events drew nationwide attention, exposing the double standards in gun rights advocacy and sparking debates about race and the Second Amendment. The Panthers' call for armed resistance to oppression sometimes led to violent confrontations. We've already mentioned the example in which Huey Newton was convicted of manslaughter following a 1967 altercation with police. And in 1969, the Panthers' Los Angeles headquarters was raided, leading to a shootout between party members and police. Both sides sustained injuries, highlighting the volatile relationship between the Panthers and law enforcement. Similarly, in 1971, in High Point, North Carolina, another raid led to a massive shootout with thousands of bullets exchanged. These incidents reflected the Panthers' commitment to the right to self-defense, but also contributed to the increasing militarization of police forces in the late 20th and early 21st century. The Black Panthers' staunch defense of the Second Amendment and their militant approach drew the attention of the FBI. Director J. Edgar Hoover labeled the party the greatest threats to the internal security of the country and targeted them through the Counterintelligence Program, or COINTELPRO. This covert operation sought to disrupt party activities and sow discord within the organization. COINTELPRO used tactics like infiltrating meetings, spreading disinformation, and sending forged letters to provoke internal conflict among party members and leaders. One of the most infamous COINTELPRO actions occurred in 1969 during a raid on the Chicago apartment of Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party. The police fired over 90 shots into the home, killing Hampton and fellow Panther Mark Clark. An autopsy later revealed that Hampton had been drugged before the raid and was shot at point-blank range, leading many to conclude that this was an assassination. The incident became a symbol of state violence against black activists and led to a civil rights lawsuit, resulting in a $1.85 million settlement for Hampton's and Clark's families. The Black Panther Party's chapters were frequently led by women, who made up about half of the organization's membership. Elaine Brown became the first woman to chair the National Black Panther Party, serving from 1974 to 1977. Her leadership marked a significant moment in the history of the party as she worked to expand its reach and influence during a turbulent time. Kathleen Cleaver, whose husband Eldridge Cleaver was also a prominent member, served as the party's communications secretary. She was responsible for shaping the messaging and managing the Black Panther newspaper, which became one of the party's most influential tools for spreading its ideology. This newspaper's circulation reached over 250,000 at its peak, making it one of the most widely read publications of the Black liberation movement. Part of the reason women became increasingly active in leadership roles was the decline in male membership. As FBI activities against the Panthers escalated, more male members were imprisoned or forced underground. This shift created opportunities for women to take on a more prominent role in the organization, which they did with great impact. The Black Panther Party quickly expanded to chapters in dozens of U.S. cities and even established an international chapter in Algeria. The Algiers office served as a base for coordinating global solidarity with liberation movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, aligning the Panthers with anti-colonial struggles worldwide. The party's focus remained on addressing systemic inequalities, advocating for practical solutions to their survival programs. These programs aimed directly to support low-income communities by meeting immediate needs while promoting self-determination. One of their most notable initiatives was the Free Breakfast for School Children program, which required significant coordination. Multiple organizations, including churches that provided distribution centers, restaurants and grocery stores that donated food and supplies, and local businesses that contributed funding, collaborated to make the program a success. By the early 1970s, this program was feeding tens of thousands of children daily, inspiring the eventual expansion of the federal school meals program. The Panthers also established legal aid offices, relief programs, and free medical care clinics to address the lack of healthcare access in African American communities. The first of these clinics, the People's Free Medical Center, opened in Berkeley, California in 1970 and offered services such as vaccinations, basic health screenings, and testing for conditions like sickle cell anemia, which disproportionately affected African Americans. At the time, access to healthcare remained extremely limited. While the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Medicare and Medicaid programs of 1965 helped end segregation in hospitals and expand healthcare access, the disparity in access persisted. Before 1963, African Americans had access to only about 15,000 hospital beds nationwide out of the country's 1.5 million beds. Through these survival programs, the Black Panthers demonstrated their commitment to empowering communities and addressing the structural problems of inequality, often filling gaps left by government institutions. Their work laid the foundation for future community-driven social programs, many of which continue to influence grassroots organizing today. And finally, for the recap, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was a revolutionary Black Power organization inspired by the Black Power movement and Malcolm X. The demands of the Black Panther Party were listed in its 10-point program. Their adherence to armed self-defense resulted in confrontations with law enforcement and the FBI. Women in the Black Panther Party helped grow the organization and run its survival programs. And finally, the Black Panther Party declined and ultimately dissolved by the early 1980s due to relentless government suppression, internal divisions, and shifting social and political priorities. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, click the thumbnail on the screen. And if you would like more resources to help you study, you can visit apushlights.com/AFAM. I wish you the best of luck with your studies, and I hope to see you back on the next lecture.